I said, could you hear Kathy doing the dishes in the kitchen?
Well, why didn't you do them before you went on?
She's piping in. Now you got it started.
Trying to make sure this Facebook is NORC's Facebook and not my Facebook. All right, let's see here. All right, we're about 5 after 7. Try to go off on the, trying to get to NORC's Facebook page here is what I'm. There we go, share to a group. There we go, we're getting that going. I see people are still coming into the room. All right, I think, let's see, we got a preview here of the Facebook. All right, everybody, welcome to NORC's April meeting. And Rocky, I don't know, Rocky, you are there. I'd like to welcome everybody to the North Oakland Republican Club April meeting. I don't know if you can see me. It's funny, I can't.
I can see you.
Oh, you can see me, okay.
Yep.
I'd like to introduce, let me see, what if there are any officials or candidates that are in the room, maybe through chat, if you can let me know where you are. I know we've got Dave Stout is here. He's the Mayor Pro Tem of Novi. And he's also running for Oakland County Board of Commissioners. What's that, District 11? I can't, let me check on your, I think you sent me. Oh, Karen Juliet is here, also on the Waterford Board of Trustees and running for the Oakland County Board of Commissioners. Let's see who else is here. That I know we got Gary Wall is entering the room. I don't know if he's here yet. Let's see, any other candidates? Oh, wait a second, Joe Kent. Let's see, trying to get these messages coming in here.
Joe Kent's running for Oakland County Treasurer.
Joe Kent is running for Oakland County Treasurer. That is right. Thank you. Let's see who else participants.
Art Fresca is running for Oakland County Waterford Trustee.
I see Bill Bullard is here. Just send me a either through the question and answer or through the chat, if you are a candidate or at any time through this presentation, let me know and we will identify you. Let's see, anybody else?
We'll see.
Lynn Getz is here. Lynn Getz for prosecutor. Really? I didn't know that. Lynn Getz is running for Oakland County prosecutor. That'd be fantastic. Oh, Tina Barton is here for Oakland County clerk. Very good. Glad you are here. And I'm glad you're running.
Excellent.
That's excellent. And let's see, Karen Juliet is here. Ryan Berman is here, is a state representative. Who else have we got here? Well, as we go forward with through the meeting, just let me know if I've missed anybody.
Andrea
Usually
Schroeder.
what we do in the meeting, we're being that we're patriots. We usually start off with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Matt, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I'm seeing a little box show up at the bottom with a lot of candidates that you haven't mentioned. I don't know if you could see that.
Oh, you can see that. Okay.
Harry Bentivolio running for the 11th District Congressional seat.
Oh, Carrie Benevolio is here running for U.S. Congress.
Mark Monahan is running for Waterford trustee.
You have Eileen Kowal running for Oakland County Commissioner out in the White Lake Waterford area.
How'd you know that, Mike?
A little bird told me.
Andrea Schroeder is running for re-election, 43rd District, State House. Heidi Warrington is running for Independence Township trustee. Kim Markey. Oh, this it cut off. We have
Yeah, Jim, if you can read those off, the candidates.
Marie Hausworth is running for the Waterford Township trustee.
All right. And I see that we've got our panelists are lining up here. That's good.
Brian, if you can hear me, your microphone is off.
Hold
Yeah,
on
but
here a second.
I need to teach you guys about Zoom etiquette. So you're supposed to have your microphone off until you're ready to speak.
Right.
Yeah,
Well, as you get to know the NORC group better, there's no etiquette.
Anyway, I'd like to show the NORC Board of Directors and Officers. I'm Matt Marco, President of NORC. I don't know if Steve Perry is in the room, who's in the room, but Steve Perry is our treasurer and Terry Whitney is our communications director. Jim Teenel, I know you're watching. Senator Jim Runstad, who is also on the dais tonight. Linda Joliker, our assistant treasurer. John Leposki, Julie Day, and Senator Mike Kowal. And Greg Fogelman's our president emeritus. And also, if you want to join NORC, membership is $25 a year if you go to our website, norc-us.org. Jim Teenel is our membership chairman. I would like to start off by, we're very pleased that our board member and good friend of NORC, Mike Kowal, is going to be our next Oakland County executive. That is fantastic. It's a breath of fresh air after what we've experienced since the loss of Brooks Patterson. And I've put up Mike's resume, which is pretty impressive. Great background, Mike, for being a county executive. Recently, you were working for the Oakland County as legislative liaison and economic development. You were in the state house. You were in the state senate and White Lake supervisor. What a fantastic background. Mike, just let us know why, what made you to finally decide to run for county executive?
Well, I think you summed it up pretty well in that introduction. You know, we're not really happy with what we're seeing going on at Oakland County right now. There seems to be a real lack of leadership, and unfortunately, we don't have the county board of commissioners anymore. It's gone over to the other side, and we're going to work real hard to get that back because we had such a good relationship between the county board of commissioners and Brooks Patterson. We were able to get a lot of things done. We're moving the county in a direction to make it pretty much recession proof. And that seems to have taken a turn. And with this economy coming up, it's not going to be an easy job for the county or for the rest of the state. And being that Oakland County is pretty much about, and Brian, you can correct me in this if you'd like, but I think we're about 16.5% of the entire budget of the state of Michigan. So it's really imperative that we have really strong, good leadership, and strong leadership, especially in the economic development and making sure Oakland's going in the right direction.
Oh, that's fantastic, Mike, and I'm so glad you're running. And with your experience, I'd like you to stick around on our panel tonight because with what we're going to be talking about, I think your experience will give us some good insight.
Sure, I'd love to.
Oh, also, I'd like to say Jose Aliaga has joined the room here. He's running for re-election on the Independence Township Board of Trustees. So welcome, Jose. Buenas noches, if it's, or is it still buenas tardes? Never too sure. Anyway, I'd like to get our main discussion going here. There's been a lot of talk about the executive emergency powers. And there was an article in today's Detroit News about how the legislature is going to get involved. I know the governor wanted to extend her emergency powers a lot longer, and the legislature pretty much kept them until the end of this month. And I know that Jim Runstad has a lot of comments on that after being a state rep, and now he's a state senator. Jim, maybe you can tell us what is going on with the powers of the governor and what's going to be happening in the legislature tomorrow.
Yes, Mark. I'm sorry, Matt. It's going to be a big day tomorrow because we're going to be back in session, and we are going to be dealing with a number of things. First, we're going to be modifying the statutes that she operates under, which are the Emergency Powers of Governance Act of 1945 and the Emergency Manager Act of 1976. So what we will be voting on is basically eliminating the Emergency Powers Act, Governor's Act of 1945, because that was very broad and it had no ability for anyone to modify the governor's directives. So she basically had immense powers and could do these unilaterally as long as she wanted. Under the 1976 Emergency Management Act, the powers were more limited, and the legislature was allowed to get involved after 26 days. What we're making a change there is making it 14 days, so that the legislature would get involved after 14 days of anything that the governor decided to do. We would review that and we would have to agree to it. So both of these, I think, are very positive changes for the state to have the other branch of government, the legislature, have some oversight. The way it is currently, as we've seen, there's a lot of rules that she could set that really don't make sense, and we have to live with them for a long period of time before the legislature gets involved. We're also going to be passing a resolution to form a bipartisan, bicameral committee that will have subpoena power, that will be able to look at all of her rulings and subpoena departments and getting a lot of information that we're currently not getting today. So those are the things we will be voting on. I think it's going to be, unfortunately, a partisan, party line vote from what I'm hearing. But if we can get these through, they would make a huge difference in terms of how our rights are protected here in the state of Michigan.
Well, her emergency declaration expires April 30th, I understand. And it would be over. Has she got the ability then to declare another emergency? And
we would have to extend that on the 30th of the month.
So
29th of the month.
So will that get extended? I assume she's going to request it.
She will request it, and right now there's discussion going on with the House and the Senate. We would have to have the votes in both the House and the Senate to either shoot that down and end the state of emergency, or extend it or modify it. All of those are things that I don't know what the answer is going to be when we get back in session.
I see. So I would imagine with the majority Republican legislature that they would probably, if it's a party line vote, wouldn't that be enough to end her emergency powers?
Well, what we're doing tomorrow is going to be a party line vote, and I think it will pass. What she's going to do tomorrow at around 3 o'clock is have a press conference, and my understanding is she's going to make a lot of modifications to the emergency powers that she has already put through. Things like loosening up a lot of the work restrictions that she had promulgated. Things like using your motorboat. We're hearing through the grapevine, but this is what we're hearing she's going to do, is loosen up a lot of the regulations. What exactly they're going to be, I don't know. I don't think any of us know for sure. But we're going to have to see what all those look like before we decide what we're going to do at the end of the month. I know there's a strong will among many in the caucus to end her state of emergency, but whether that's going to be the majority, what tomorrow is going to, the impact of tomorrow, those are the things I'm not sure about.
I've put up the list of the panelists here, and I know you guys also have a lot of experience with the legislature. You can see we got Brian Calley with us, Mike Kowal, we just talked to, Rocky. I know you were a rep for a while, and I guess the question is, what are the governor's powers and authority to really sort of circumvent our individual rights of going out? How far can she go with this in telling us what we can buy and what we can't buy?
Is that to me?
Yeah, it could be to you or anybody. I'm just or anybody on the panel who'd like to get involved in that.
It is these two statutes primarily that she's using, and the one that she's going to rely on if we vote down her state of the emergency is the 1945 statute. That one does not have any legislative oversight. That one is a much broader powers. If it goes to court, she would argue under that statute that she has the ability to do basically whatever she wants. If it goes to court, we are going to argue under the 1976 ruling that we do have the ability to shut down the state of emergency if we so choose. So my guess is if this all comes to a head at the end of the month, it's probably going to end up in court.
I'd go ahead and I can throw in a little bit on this one too, Matt. As Senator Runstead just mentioned, there are two different acts at play. One from about the time I was born in the late 1970s, and another one from the 1940s, 1945. There is a conflict between those two. The problem is the one from 76, it references the one from 45. And so normally you'd say, hey, well, one passed after the other, that one must take precedent. But they have different requirements, and yet the one that passed later said that the powers from the original one still remain. And so that makes it really muddy. So I would agree that if there is not a consensus and agreement, it probably would end up in court. And so as a practical matter, court action is probably not going to be swift in terms of getting to a court of final jurisdiction. So court is a long process. And so that puts it into a scenario where the governor would still be in the driver's seat until the courts sorted out that the discrepancy or the dispute between the two. So I think there's a pretty big incentive to try and figure out a way to move forward together, but it's not clear to me that that's possible.
You know, Brian Calley, I have a question for you. Since you were the lieutenant governor, you know a lot about what goes on in the government. Originally, the Governor Whitmer was saying that the supplies for the hospitals were not sufficient because, and she was blaming the president. I'm just wondering, what is the state government's responsibility for maintaining supplies? I know that you guys control how many beds, or the government controls how many beds there are. I was just curious. I'm glad you're here just to let us, if you've got some knowledge about how that works.
Yeah, frankly, neither the state nor the federal government would normally be involved in supplying personal protective equipment to hospitals. They have their own procurement processes, and so something like this there just wasn't, there weren't stockpiles in place that contemplated an international shortage. You know, it's one thing to have a shortage on shore. It's another thing to have everybody else in the world all want exactly the same thing at exactly the same time. That's why I don't think it was I don't think it was fair criticism that somehow this is the president's fault that there were shortages in personal protection. In the meantime, though, what we've seen both with personal protective equipment here in Michigan and around the country, that it went from a few hours supply to a week to 10 days worth of supply. That's still not as much as you want, but you're not kind of living on the edge. And also the ventilator supply is turned around enough to where the rest of the world is coming to the United States because the Defense Production Act was put into effect to to build a lot more ventilators. And so not only is the need met here in the United States and here in Michigan, but we're also now supplying the rest of the world, other countries calling the president and asking for ventilators. So that's a pretty big turnaround. I mean, there's no way to make a global pandemic smooth. It's not going to be smooth. It's always going to be difficult. You're always going to be chasing it. And so as we move forward in this type of situation, I think the fact that people pulled together, industry started producing onshore more personal protective equipment, and in fact, we had a couple of my board members on the Small Business Association of Michigan. You guys have heard of Stormy Cromer? They make the hats with the ear flaps. They are making hospital gowns and face masks now. And right in Washtenaw County, Acroval Technologies that does normally mouth guards for sports. Well, not a lot of that going on right now, and so they converted over. They're making face shields for hospitals, and so those are small companies, but big ones like General Motors are doing the same thing. So really, the country pulled together and has really come a long way in solving that problem. And I definitely don't think it's fair at all that people put that at the feet of the president.
I agree.
Well, I agree with you, Brian. I mean, just today there was an article in the Detroit News of a company that is producing swabs, basically long Q-tips to check for the virus for testing, and they can't get approval from the state of Michigan to put them out on the open market. So the state of Michigan won't buy them, but the hospitals are buying them. Other states are buying them. They just sent a load to Illinois and Ohio, but the state of Michigan's not buying them because it doesn't meet their criteria, or they're just not testing for them.
It's kind of a cluster at the state in terms of the purchasing for all of these vendors. There's a single email that we are to refer everybody to. There's probably 10 different vendors who've contacted me saying, I have an oversupply. We want to get this information to the right individuals in order to supply the state or whoever. They refer them to this email. To my knowledge, none of these people have even gotten back to. They're not even getting back to these vendors with the supplies and telling them what to do.
Yep. Rocky, can you hear me now? Can we hear you? No, you're muted. I don't know what's the matter, Rocky. We can't seem to get you your microphone working.
Yeah, his mute's on.
Yeah, but but I don't think he muted himself. I think that he has to be unmuted by the
I
host.
have unmuted him.
Okay, all right.
He is unmuted here, Rocky. What can we do? What can we do? Rocky, do you think your equipment is working? No. Rocky, you don't know American Sign Language?
I think the Democrat Oakland County chair has hacked in and silenced Rocky.
You know, one problem I have with what the...
How about that? Can you hear that?
Oh,
There
now
we
we
go.
can hear you. You're back.
Okay, so I guess it must have been the headset.
It reminds me of the cone of silence from...
Yeah, I felt like I couldn't get in a word in edgewise, but I have so much to catch up on. Hey, real quickly, if we can just backtrack for a quick second. When we're talking about the governor's power, one thing that we need to also focus on and realize is that Attorney General Barr now is going after and opening up investigations on states and governors that are using excessive controls and excessive orders. I don't call this the governor's executive order. I call it the governor's excessive order. There's a big difference between the initial executive order, which was 2020-21, and now where we're at with 2020-42. This is an excessive order where it controls what you cannot buy. And it's a takings where it prevents an individual from going to another property where they're paying property tax on. So it is actually what I would consider in legal terminology or illegal parlance as a takings. By the way, nice beard, Brian.
Hey, I've got an idea on how... I got an idea that the governor might like that would allow her to open up the schools, get the schools going again, and the businesses. And what we do is we declare all the schools to be no virus zones or virus-free zones. And we put up this sign, you know, like 20 yards away from the schools and businesses. And I think she'll buy into that. And the Democrat colleagues will buy into that. And it should work. Make them all virus-free zones, and we can all get back to work and end this quarantine. I think you don't
It's a
think
great
she'll buy
idea.
that? All
Great
right.
idea.
Problem I'm having, originally her logic was to flatten the curve. And from everything that we're seeing now, the curve has been flattened. So why do they keep moving the goalpost on this thing? It seems like it's time to get back to work. And Brian, I'm sure that your members of your of the businesses, so all the members of the SBA can be very thoughtful on how to proceed with caution and get their businesses running. They don't need to have a big brother government telling them what they can and can't do. Would you agree, Brian?
Yeah, I should probably point out too, because sometimes people don't realize that I'm the president of the Small Business Association of Michigan, which is different than the U.S. Small Business Administration. They're the government. They do the loans and the loan guarantees and a lot of the stuff that I was going to tell you about. The Small Business Association, we do best practices, compliance education, advocacy, work, group purchasing, and energy efficiency, a bunch of stuff that we do with the association. But small businesses are very, very innovative people, and their employees are like they're like their family. In fact, in a lot of cases, they actually literally are their family. And so we know that our small businesses care a lot about their employees, and they care a lot about their customers, because that's their community, that's their home, that's where they're from. And so I have a lot of confidence they're up for the challenge in terms of the regular social distancing requirements, the sanitation practices within the business, doing even new things like health screening to the extent that that would be required, the use of personal protective equipment, and especially for public facing type of jobs in close proximity. I mean, there are a lot of things that can be done. These are regular OSHA standards and practices. Actually, the CDC has put out some pretty good guidance on that. But I thought I'd also point out that there's something that Congress just passed, and it's on its way to the president, like as we speak, that he'll sign the Paycheck Protection Program. And this was a concept. It's not a stimulus really. It's like a survival package, and it just helps small businesses to make payroll during this couple month period when a lot of them are down, and so it's gonna allow a bunch of them to get to the other side of the crisis that they face right now, and the economic crisis that they face right now. And the way that the Secretary of Treasury, Steve Mnuchin, so this is the guy in charge of the IRS, and it's weird for me to say this, but the best friend of small business in all of the United States of America is the guy who runs the IRS. Seriously, Steve Mnuchin has been absolutely amazing, and he just has been a force for getting this support from the president's signature deployed out in the field within a week, a brand new thing within a week. Nobody would have guessed that the federal government could move that fast. And then it was so popular, it ran out in 13 days. And so now there's another round coming. The president will sign it tonight, and maybe as soon as tomorrow, that Paycheck Protection Program will be opened back up. 43,000 businesses in Michigan have already taken advantage of this. $10.3 billion. That's the difference made here in Michigan. It's a real lifeline, and I think that everybody can be proud that the federal government actually they understand these small businesses. It's not because they're bad managers. They didn't do anything wrong. These small businesses are just in a situation where they have been essentially shut down. Many of them either partially or fully shut down, and there's nothing they can do about it in the short term. And so this help became very, very necessary. Steve Mnuchin, President Trump, Senator Marco Rubio actually was the kind of the inventor of the idea in the first place. Just great leadership and a huge difference. It is the difference between survival and not for tens of thousands of businesses in Michigan, no question about it.
Very good, Brian. And after we're done with this segment on talking about the emergency powers and all that, I want to give you some specific time to talk about really what it's going to take for your member companies to get going again and what health they're in. But until then, if anybody has any questions for Senator Runstad or anyone else on the panel regarding the governor's emergency powers, just use your chat or your Q&A setting on this thing and type it in. Here's a—
Matt, I just want to chime in for a quick second.
Sure.
And Brian, as a business owner myself, that's down to my last 22% of my business operating, I concur with you. It was probably very much needed, but I'm very much concerned that basically what we're doing is we're loading a ton of debt with the money that we're printing. And by the time we're done with this COVID response and emergency response and everything else, we're going to be looking at a nation with $30 trillion in debt, most of that money printed in quantitative easing. And when our gross domestic product is actually will be less than $20 trillion. And that's beyond even Greece levels. If you remember when Greece fell financially, they were at 120% GDP to debt ratio. We're going to be beyond that potentially at the end of this year. And that's something that concerns me, because I'm not sure if we should have just frozen everything and made the essential operations of food and logistics and healthcare operational and funded, but everything else frozen, because quite frankly, we may be looking at a potential recession/depression that we've just created. It's just a concern.
No, and I'm glad you bring that up, Rocky, because I think our national debt's the biggest problem this country has, and to see it balloon like that to 100% of GDP and beyond is very scary.
I'm glad that a buddy of mine, Michael Katz out of Florida, a representative, and Tom Cotton out of Arkansas are actually leading an effort to, and Dan Crenshaw, as a matter of fact, from Texas, are leading an effort now to look at potentially, can we come back and change our laws so that we can potentially as a nation sue China or do something to the fact of recouping some of that money from our national debt. It's an issue.
Well, remember that we have a lot of bond money out there with China, and that we owe China a tremendous amount of debt as well. It may be an interesting procedure to look at what would happen if we didn't pay them back and just took that as damages with this coronavirus that's out there. You have to remember, China, they pay their workers 15 cents on a dollar for what every worker here makes. There's a lot of possibilities there, and I'm sure our president will take advantage of everything that's available to him.
I concur. I'm just concerned about the fact that this may have longer implications on the US dollar, which is considered the international currency, potentially being taken away from us, and an international currency being brought to the table. And that's what China, Russia, and all of our enemies want. It's it's obviously way above our pay grade, but this is something that we should also be concerned about when we're looking at our national representatives and our US Senate candidates, because Gary Peters is not that candidate.
And Carrie Bentivolio has brought up a question here. Carrie, I tried to put your microphone on. Are you able to talk right now? All right, I guess not. Carrie brought up the point, Brillion LLC in Brighton can produce medicine replacing Chinese medicine contractors. How can we add to their capabilities with the state or federal interest loan?
Well, it's not so much through the interest loans. It's basically right now the president has pushed and asked Congress at the federal level to look at easing up some of the regulations that requires for some of these compounding companies, and basically it'd be a compounding company or a pharmaceutical company to make the components necessary. It's also relaxing potentially some of the requirements for, there's a patent, and the patent law says on drugs, there's usually a 17-year patent, and it can be reignited again for an X amount of 10 years potentially. I think it's 10 more years. This would require federal law to be changed to allow more of these compounding agencies and pharmacies to come back to the United States and work here.
There's a question here from a Steve Martinko. I'm sure, hopefully I'm not pronouncing your name wrong. Question for Brian Kelly. Do you need the courts to rule on the merits of implementing lawsuits that the Emergency Management Act must be declared an unconstitutional delegation of legislative authority to avoid the governor using her veto powers against legislative action?
Well, the veto power, if the legislature passes something and sends it to the governor's desk, that's where the veto power comes into effect. But what would have to be that would have to be settled by the courts would be if the legislature did not extend the emergency order and the governor decided to go ahead and extend it anyway based on the 1945 law, which one takes precedent, that's what would be worked out in court. And since the executive branch is the one that has their regulatory enforcement agencies, I think that certainly most businesses in the state who rely on certain permits and subject to fines and all those sorts of things, licensing that the state does, if their regulatory agency is still issuing the requirements of them, they really can't be put in a situation where they don't comply. Most would, until a court said no, it's the Emergency Management Act of 76 that takes precedent. So that's really the place where it would be if there was a discrepancy on the extension of the emergency power, would have to go to court. A change in law that just gets vetoed, that wouldn't go to court. I mean, that's just a matter of the veto power of the governor.
And there's a name that I know I'm going to screw up. Mr. Dowley, is it Ruthanian Dowley? I'm sure I'm screwing
Ruthan
up.
Dowley.
Oh, you got that name. Very good. Does anyone, and he's asking, this could be a rhetorical question, does anyone feel as I do that our president was badly deceived about the severity of this virus in order to destroy the momentum of our economy? There was
I
so
think
much
the whole
more.
world, if I can tackle that one first,
Yeah.
I think the whole world has been deceived. But at the same time, we know that this is a virus that's extremely contagious. And we also know that it came out of a lab. We believe that it came out of a lab in Wuhan, China, because quite frankly, if it came out of the wet markets, we all know the Chinese government stopped certain things and the wet markets are back open. So they must know something that we don't. Quite frankly, I believe that the whole world was duped, but at the same time, this is a very serious virus. It's extremely contagious. And I'm not a doctor, but I know enough to know, and I've lost 2 friends to this, that it is extremely contagious. And for people that have underlying healthcare conditions, we now know if you have 2 or more underlying healthcare conditions or an immune system that's lacking, that this could be a death sentence. So it is something that, how do you value life? And do you put the economy ahead of life, or do you put life ahead of the economy? It's a tough call.
Got a question, which is a good one here from Paul Sophia. I'm sure I'm screwing your name up here. It's hard for me to read the roof. Sophia.
No, that's also
Paul Sophia. Why would anybody want to stay employed when unemployment is often greater than their wages? And this is a problem, Brian. I'm wondering if you're hearing from your member companies is that it's hard to stay staffed when they can make more money sitting at home than going to work.
Yeah, the CARES Act did have a $600 per week increase on unemployment. There was an effort. You might recall that it was going to pass, and then it was delayed a day, delayed another day. It was this specific issue. There was an effort to try and modify the bill on the Thursday night that it passed to make it so that unemployment benefits cannot exceed what your income was before you were unemployed. And it just didn't pass. So the way it works now is you take the state benefit, the regular state benefit, which tops out at $362 a week, and then you add $600 on top of that for the next 16 weeks. That's the CARES Act impact. So during that time period, there are many people whose income will be higher on unemployment than it otherwise would have been. I think like $47,000 or $48,000 a year is what the equivalency would be. Now that doesn't include benefits, but that's the salary equivalency. However, it is true though that if an employer offers an employee a job and they turn it down, or somebody's laid off and you offer them their job back and they turn it down, then it's the responsibility of that employer to report that to the unemployment agency, and they become ineligible for unemployment at that point because they're considered to have voluntarily terminated their employment. So I know that's kind of a sticky situation for employers to be in, especially small businesses. You know, they don't want to necessarily get into a conflict with their employees, but ultimately, if a person does refuse to come back, even if their income is higher on unemployment, then if that employer reports them to the unemployment agency, they will lose access to that benefit.
However, there's some loopholes in that if somebody says, I'm caring for someone, well, it's very hard to determine that you're caring for an elderly person and that precludes you from going back. There's a number of these kinds of loopholes. And I remember watching the debate, and it was very partisan, that the Republican House and Senate felt that no one should be paid more for not working than working, and the Democrat Senate and House were in absolute disagreement. I saw them interviewed. They said it doesn't matter. If they're getting paid more, that's fine. So it was a very partisan vote.
Yeah, I just invited Kerry Benevolio to join the panel. He was a U.S. Congressman. Thank you, Kerry. And you're also a candidate again for the same seat in Congress.
Same seat.
Very good. Welcome to the panel. And
Thank you.
anyway, you had some feedback about what Rocky was saying.
Yeah. Basically, there's companies in Michigan right now, an example would be Bryland, which is not in the district, but they're just out of the district. And Bryland LLC patented medicine for the big drug companies like Merck and Johnson & Johnson. And they have two lines running. The benefit there is they're self-contained. If there was, and they can manufacture medicine at biosecurity level 3. And if one of the lines was to be contaminated, they don't have to shut down all the rest of the lines. I have two lines running now. I've toured the facility, the capability of doing 6 more, and we're with them. I'm not a lobbyist, so I'm limited.
Gotcha.
To help them get federal funding for I think it's $150 million to put in 6 more lines, which would mean manufacturing patented medicine on pharmaceuticals.
I'm sorry, I can't make out anything.
Gary, I hate to tell you this, I think your internet connection is kind of spotty, or your Wi-Fi.
You got to drop the call in.
Hard to, or your call, something.
Call up.
Yeah, I think it's hard to hear you, Kerry, but I think that we got the gist that company you're talking about has some great capabilities to supply us and take some of that out of China. Is that basically the gist, Kerry? Because you're very hard.
That's exactly right.
Right. Very good, Kerry. Thank you for that.
Sorry, how's that?
Got a question for the panel from Terry Whitney, our communications director. He says in 1918, America fought World War I and had the pandemic of the Spanish flu, and did not shut down. Everyone wore masks. What would it take for Michigan to adopt similar laws? And were there laws? I don't even think there were laws about wearing masks, but people just sort of toughed through it, I think is what Terry is saying.
Well, a lot of the information during the First World War was not, let's just say the communications was not what it is today. And a lot of people didn't even know that there was a pandemic going on. And the government was very slow to react to it because they didn't want to take away from the actions that were going on overseas. So there's a whole variety of things that are different today versus what happened in 1918.
Charles Schott asks a question for Senator Runstad. What info does the governor share with the Senate and House when they're discussing actions for May 1st and beyond, do they present only their data or wide range of models and predictions?
It's very spotty at best. In fact, she's having a press conference tomorrow. Leadership was given some indication of what might be in the press conference. This is when we're going to be having session tomorrow, so we don't even know before the session what exactly she's going to be proposing. So the communication has not been good from the governor. And then again, at the end of the month, we're going to have some decisions to make in terms of extending the state of emergency or not, or extending it with conditions. So all of that's ahead of us very shortly, but the information we're getting from the governor is spotty at best.
Well, I'd like to sort of wrap this up by asking, what do you think is going to happen after April 30th? Are we going to, I mean, basically you said the legislature may not extend her powers. It could end up in the courts, but what happens to all of us that are quarantined? Am I going to be able to go out and get my hair cut or not? I'm going to need a weed whacker from a landscaper if it takes any longer.
Well,
I think,
go ahead, Jim. Sorry.
Yeah, I think Brian Kelly is correct, and not only in terms of business. If, let's say, hypothetically, the legislature says we are not going to extend the state of emergency, she says you don't have the authority under the 1945 statute. We're going to continue that. We're going to continue regulating business so that they can't operate. We're also going to rely upon the state police and the law enforcement to enforce these rules. And then it goes to court, which could take a significant period of time. So that's the way I see it playing out. If we say she cannot extend, she says, I have the authority, and now it's going to go to court, and probably she's going to continue operating the way she was before.
I'm getting some more comments. And first of all, I'd like to say I've had people are saying that we're not broadcasting live on Facebook. I've had some technical difficulties trying to do that. So I sort of gave up on it. So I've had several people here saying they're checking the NORC group, and we don't have it.
Hey, Matt, I apologize. I know that I've got to leave by 8 o'clock.
Okay,
exactly.
That's fine. You got.
But, do you mind
Rocky,
if I
I'll tell you. Let's jump then to. I had you later in the agenda. Why don't you just quickly update us then on who's running in Oakland County?
Yeah, if that's all right with you. Thank you very much for letting me go. I really wanted to thank every single one of you out there that participated with recruiting of some outstanding candidates. Just to give you a kind of, first let me give you a 10,000 foot idea of where we're at. Out of all the different seats that we were filling in Oakland County, from county executive all the way down to the township trustees and supervisors, clerks, and library positions, or park and recreation positions, we filled all but 5 positions in the entire county, which is unheard of. All but 5. And most of the 5 were in Royal Oak Township or in other areas that the Democrats control extremely well. When you look at the Democrats, they did not fill 72 seats. They didn't participate in a lot of Republican strongholds. But now it comes down to those seats that are purple, where it could go Republican or Democrat. Our county commission seats, like Dave Stout in Novi. He's a great candidate. We've got to get behind David Stout, and hopefully in the future we'll be able to get his website in front of everybody so that people can donate to Dave Stout's campaign in Novi. You've also got one that is in the NORC area, and that's Clint Kesto. He's running against a Democrat in the 5th county commission seat. We've got to support Clint Kesto and make sure that Clint wins that seat so that we can win back the majority. There's also one here in where I'm broadcasting from, in the Troy Clawson area in Troy, right next to Somerset Mall. You've got a very wealthy district that's represented by a Democrat, believe it or not. And then let's go on to our county-wides, which I'm very proud to tell you that we've got Tina Barton, the president of the Oakland County Clerks Association. Tina is running as a Republican, as a clerk, against, everybody knows her, the Witch of the West, Lisa Brown, the worst clerk in the entire state of Michigan. The one that, if you recall, in 2018, when there were lines of people voting on tablecloth or on little napkins and pieces of paper because Lisa Brown didn't listen to people like Tina Barton and order enough ballots. We've also got, of course, Mike Bouchard, and then the two at the top of the ticket. We've got Lynn Getz, who's running as prosecutor. Now some people may say she's running on her husband's name, but I think we've got the best Getz running. Lynn is a lot better than her husband. Plus, she brings that the feminine vote, which we always say that females tend to get 5% more in the general election. Lynn is going to be an outstanding candidate, and once her website comes up, we'll advertise that to make sure that people can check it out and support her. And then at the top of the Oakland County ticket, we've got our very own Mike Kowal, who's up there on the screen. Mike is going to be an outstanding candidate. We're already through different parts and different individuals helping the campaign, from the Oakland County Republican Party all the way to individuals that are supporting Mike from southeast, southwest, northeast, northwest of the county, getting behind Kowal for county executive. We need to make sure that Mike wins because David Coulter is running this county into the ground. We've all seen it. He is a fraud. His number two, Hillary Chambers, is actually running this whole thing. And Mike Kowal, if you all recall, it's Mike Kowal that stood up for Oakland County and fought the transit tax, which would have basically been a disaster right now, number one, and number two, would have taken an extra $1,000 out of our pockets. So Mike, we owe you a debt of gratitude for what you've done for us, and we owe this man a lot of support. We've got to get out there and make sure that Republicans come out, because I believe, by talking to Tina and a few other clerks, but predominantly Tina Barton, that we're going to see an uptick on AV voting in Oakland County and across the state of Michigan. There may be one precinct per community, plus the rest of the voters will get AVs. So we've got to be prepared for it. We got to be prepared for challenges, and we got to be prepared to get our Republican friends, neighbors, and even those that aren't Republican to come out and vote Republican. So thank you very much, Matt. Thank you for allowing me to be on today.
Rocky, thank you for the update on that. And we're all going to work hard to get behind, to get our Republican majorities. I'm glad we got most of those races with a horse running in it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We'll make sure, by the way, Joe Kent is online too. Joe's running for treasurer in Oakland County. There's one other candidate, and I apologize, I've got to look at the list, but we'll get you the email addresses and how to get in touch with the candidates for the primaries, as well as, most importantly, for the general election.
Who is Water Resources?
There's 3 individuals. That's why I didn't want to touch that one.
Oh, okay.
All right, very good, Rocky. Thank you for all that.
Thank you, y'all. God bless you.
And I'd like to, we moved up. I'd like to go back to Brian Calley. And Brian Calley has been doing a fantastic job as the head of the Small Business Association. And Brian, I've been watching your daily updates and all that. I know that it's tough for you because you've got to have good relationships with the government as well as represent all your member companies well. So Brian, I'm just wondering if you could just tell us, what is it going to take to get all the businesses running again, and what kind of health are they in?
Well, a lot of them are literally in survival mode right now. We sent out a survey to our members that we'll publish here real shortly, maybe as soon as tomorrow. We had a lot of responses back, and there were about 14% that were either at or very close to giving up hope to survive. If you think about it, I don't know if 14% sounds like a lot to you, but 14% is a lot of businesses when you consider how many there are in the state. And most had laid off at least some employees. So the impact on overall on our economy and on our communities that rely on these small businesses is enormous. We have been working at a lot of different levels with the House, with the Senate, with different departments within state government and the governor's office, in trying to find a pathway forward. We do think that there are some positive steps that are about to happen, maybe as soon as tomorrow for some, And then, but in terms of the long term, there's still a lot of questions with respect to where we go from here. What I'm concerned about is that even for those companies that make it through this time period, the world is going to change a lot, and nobody really knows what it's going to look like, because we've never had a complete economic shutdown of basically the whole country at the same time, and so this is going to be a trying and difficult time. But at the same time, I have a lot of confidence that small business owners are scrappy. They're entrepreneurs. They're tough. They know how to take a punch. And so if anybody can make it, they can make it. But the odds stacked against some of them are just so astronomical. So what we're trying to do is make sure, first of all, that they get attached to everything that they can get attached to help them. There are a couple of federal resources that have been made available that are a big help, at least in getting through this trying time. Where we go from here, though, every single day that we remain fully closed, there are more and more that just won't make it. And so even if there are additional requirements to opening, we think that a lot of our business owners are planning on doing that anyway, that they understand what needs to be done. The idea of re-engineering their processes to put more space in between people, going to more home-based work for office staff, and doing things like curbside pickup and more internet sales and non-contact deliveries. Those sorts of innovations that's what entrepreneurs do. And we know they're up for it. It's not going to be business as usual. And that's part of the job that we have between now and when things start opening up, is to try to instill confidence in the decision makers that business owners, small business owners especially, they're up for this challenge. They're up for operating during a time when we have a disease threat. These practices, there are a lot of best practices that we know now, and we're just anxious to get at it. So our advocacy work is really aimed toward that, to instilling confidence in the policymakers that they're up for the challenge, that they can get this done. They can protect their employees, they can protect their their customers, and be a part of the solution, so that we don't have to pick between our economy and public health. We should have a healthy economy and public health. I mean, these shouldn't be pitted against each other as they are today.
Julie Day asked a question. She was bringing up about all that money, like $350 billion, that was going to large publicly traded companies and some big franchise public companies. And she's just wondering if that helps or hurts what you see among the Association of Businesses.
Yeah, so there were about, I believe the number was about 20 publicly traded companies that went under kind of a loophole in the restaurant qualification for small business loans, or for the Paycheck Protection Program. And the president has asked that they return that money. It was not meant for publicly traded companies. They have a lot more options and way that they can get between now and in 2 months from now, or whenever things can kind of get more back to something that looks like normal. I think most of them are going to give the money back, but I want to point out, though, that even if you add up all of those publicly traded companies, it still was nowhere near most of the money. In fact, it was $349 billion. It was probably less than $100 million that went to those publicly traded companies. So it was bad, and we didn't like it, and I'm glad that they're reversing it. But it didn't have a big impact on the overall amount that went to small businesses. And I should also point out too that it makes me feel really warm inside to hear Republicans talk about the deficit again, because it seemed like we didn't talk about that for a long time.
Exactly.
Here in Michigan, we made a lot of progress during the Snyder administration in reducing the overall debt by over $20 billion in state government. We know that it's possible for government to get out of debt or to reduce the amount of debt. The reason, though, I think that the president is right in this case to take very aggressive action, including deficit spending, for this time period. We had a finite period of time. What he's trying to do is make sure that when we get to that point of reopening, and it's going to be a phased or staged process, most certainly, that's what he has proposed. When we get to that point, that his theory is that if we support companies in keeping their teams together, keeping people on payroll, even when the business is closed down, that the ability for the economy to kind of snap back up in place, to have a faster ramp up of economic activity, will allow our economy to get back on track quicker. And that's worth the deficit spending. That's the theory. I think that that's probably a better bet than just winging it and seeing how it goes and hoping that somebody economically that we survive to the other side of it. So I think that the president's right on this one, and it makes the deficit spending absolutely makes me nervous. But I think of all the bad options that are in front of us, this is the best bad option.
I have a question here for you, Brian, from Martha Uzten, and I'm sorry, Martha, if I'm screwing up your name. She says, my company applied for the SBA disaster loan assistance, $10,000. How long is it taking to get info? There's no way for us to check.
Yeah, I've been really disappointed with the Small Business Administration in the federal government. Remember, I told you Steve Mnuchin and Secretary of Treasury and the IRS has been great. The Small Business Administration, ironically, has not been able to provide very good customer service. The program that you're talking about, the economic injury disaster loan that has an advance, like a grant of $10,000 on the front end of it, they got overwhelmed. They had more applications that they could handle, and it's taken them a long time to process it. But I do know of some other companies that, after not hearing anything for a couple of weeks, then the approval started running. So don't lose hope because you haven't heard anything. I think that they're finally starting to get their system.
Okay. We didn't lose you there, Brian, did we? Seems like.
Sorry, it cut out. Sorry.
With
I'm not sure
technology,
what
I never know if
happened
I did something wrong or what's going on. And I would like to say one thing for Brian, which is fantastic. He lives way out in a rural area where there's no internet or broadband internet access. And he has to drive somewhere out in his car just to try to get a better reception, right, Brian? I don't know where you are right now, but I know you're in your car, probably out in a farm area, right?
Yeah, I just drive a couple miles closer to town, and I can do streaming video from there. But I got 3 kids and a dog, and none of them respect my privacy, so it's better this way anyway.
You just can't get any respect. I've got a question here from Mark Monahan, and I'm having trouble reading this guy. I got a bright light here, just trying to make for a better video. It says, can we at the state level review the actions, good and bad, within the state and develop a state response protocol should this occur again in the future? Many concerns over multiple issues within the state on reporting actions of hospitals and better defining what is allowed or not. I guess that's more for a panel than just for Brian. Maybe Senator Runstad or.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're going to be passing tomorrow, is a commission that would be bipartisan, bicameral, and they would be able to look at real time all of these decisions by a governor now or in the future, and would have subpoena power. So if there is a major problem within a department, this commission would be able to address that right away. So we're hoping to pass that tomorrow, and I think we will be passing that tomorrow.
Very good. I'm getting a visitor into the room here. Hi, Ginger. Speaking of dogs. Very good. And I'd like to say we've got more candidates who've jumped in. We've got, Kevin Whiteford is running for RNC. Michelle Bishop for Springfield Township Clerk is here. Oh, actually, she's not here. Tina, you threw that one in there. That's good. But we should, we want to highlight all, and I imagine it's very difficult for candidates right now. They can't go out knocking on doors. And we at NORC are going to definitely do something to help all the candidates here. I'll talk about that before we wrap up here. But anyway, Brian, I think you guys are doing a fantastic job at the Small Business Association. Your daily briefings are fantastic. Do you want to tell people how they can tune into your daily briefings?
Yeah, there's so much information coming out right now for certainly anybody who either has a small business, or if you need information, so public officials, if you need information for small businesses, we do daily at 3 o'clock. This actually it competes with the governor. She's always doing her press conferences at 3 o'clock as well. But we do a daily briefing, a half an hour on Facebook Live. So the Small Business Association of Michigan Facebook page, we do a Facebook Live. It's actually like it's on Zoom, but we broadcast it on Facebook. And we take everything that's happened in the last 24 hours that's important for small business owners to know, and we provide that to our members in a way that's deciphered. We kind of curate it, we put it into regular language, and then we also have the SBAM website, sbam.org. We're curating that all the time for just for small business owners. So I think it's really, in the whole country, I'd put it up against any other resource that sifts out all the information that's out there and the noise that's out there. It just pulls out just what does a business owner need to know, and presents it in a very comprehensive way.
Well, I've been watching this, Brian, your daily thing, and they're fantastic. You so concisely boil down all the complexities of filing the paperwork and all that, and I think you're providing a fantastic service for your members and for the people in Michigan.
Yeah, thanks, Matt.
And and I think about the last gubernatorial election and what a better governor you would have been.
I concur with that.
Me too.
Very good.
Just couldn't get past that primary. It was a real stickler.
Yeah, I feel your pain on that.
Very good. Yeah, I had one question came over. Somebody asked, I've already switched from that, but what is the point of this meeting? And I'd like to say for everybody who's new to a NORC meeting, our whole mission is to help inform and educate and involve the community into political and governmental affairs. And we really don't care what your political orientations are. We just think that good governance includes the electorate, the people that are voting, to be well informed, be well involved, and this gets people down more into the grassroots level. And this is our first online attempt at doing this, and we've actually got some fantastic outreach. Over 100 people that have signed into this. And we're also recording this, and we'll probably be posting it up on our social media platforms as well as YouTube. So just to answer that question, I'd like to also say that for our events coming up, and I don't know if there's going to be a Waterford Memorial Day Parade. I guess nobody knows at this point, but that would be our event next month. And then what we're planning on doing to help the candidates is doing a Meet the Candidates event on June 25th, where we'll let everything just for candidates who can come forward and introduce themselves to the public. We think that'll help make up the lost time for knocking on doors. NORC has done this years ago. We've done it before at the Waterford Township Hall. Maybe we'd be able to do it there again. If not, maybe we'll use this venue to be able to do it, just to help out the candidates. And then July 18th, we're planning on our annual picnic, and that will also be an opportunity for candidates to come and interface with people that come and join that. So anyway, I especially want to thank our guests, our panelists here, Brian Calley from SBAM, Jim Runstad, our state senator, and our next Oakland County executive, Mike Kowal. And thank you again, Rocky. I know you've already left the room, but hopefully, let me see. I'll check again to see what other candidates that I may have missed here, because I'm sure that I'm going to get in trouble for some of those that were listed here. I don't know if you guys see any. Heidi Warrington, Independence Township trustee candidate. Oh, Terry Whitney raised his hand. If you can raise your hand, that's a good thing. That gets my attention too. Terry Whitney did. He is running for Independence Township trustee. Who else have I missed? If you guys can raise your hands.
Did you get Carrie Bentivolio?
Carrie, yep, we got Carrie in there. We even made him a speaker for a while. I'm just trying to get to that list of whoever it was. But anyway, we will, anybody that I've missed, we will list your names and do you right. But I want to thank everybody for participating in our April NORC meeting, all you guys, and feel free to join NORC online, and we hope to stay involved, and everybody stay safe. Thank you so much for participating tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. See you guys.
See you.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.